Hey, Eagle fans, it's EaglefanKarl, and it is now Friday of Super Bowl week. We are only 2 days away from the big game, and at this point, I cannot contain my excitement. It's really hard for me to focus on anything. All I can think about is getting to this game and hopefully having the Eagles finally bring home the Lombardi Trophy. If you've been following me all week, you know I've been doing a series of videos all week leading up to the Super Bowl. Earlier in the week, on Sunday and Monday, I was still dealing with reactions from the NFC Championship game and the win. Tuesday, I did a video on some interesting facts and stats about the game. Things that really don't go into necessarily a breakdown or a prediction, but things that I found interesting anyway. Then Wednesday and Thursday was a combination of companion videos looking on Wednesday at reasons why the Eagles could lose the game, and Thursday looking at reasons why the Eagles could win the game. All this leading up to my prediction video today, where I'll be letting you know exactly what I think could happen. As you can see, I've got my conference champion shirt on with the little Super Bowl logo, so I am ready to go and excited about what's going to potentially happen on Sunday. One of the first things I have to say is I think it would be such a Philly way to win our first Super Bowl to do it with a backup quarterback. I think that just sort of goes with the narrative of the city and the team. It's one of those things that people have been saying for a while now that, when the Eagles finally do win it, it'll probably come out of nowhere, and that's sort of what will be the case in this season. If we end up winning this thing, it's really going to come out of nowhere. No one had the expectation we were even going to get to the Super Bowl at the beginning of this season, let alone have a possibility to win the thing. So it certainly would come out of the blue if that was the case. The other thing I often think about too is, back in the 2005 year or the 2004-2005 season when the Eagles made the Super Bowl the last time, like I'd said in my prior videos, it was such a relief by the time they got there that I really didn't truly enjoy it like I am this run. And I also think that it had to do with the fact that, I really just I wanted to believe they'd win that game, but at the end of the day, I sort of kind of knew that they probably weren't going to. They had shown that particular team had shown that they didn't always come up big in big games. And they were playing against the Patriots team. I'm going to get a little bit later in terms of the Patriots this year. But they were playing up against a really solid Patriots team, and it was really hard for me to try and see how they were going to win that game. I think ultimately, when people had asked me by prediction, I think I had predicted the Eagles were going to win. I think I was picking that more with my heart than my head, because I think down deep I knew that the Eagles weren't going to win that game. But at the end of the day, they actually played real well in that game, all things considered, and came really close, but ultimately didn't bring home the prize that we were all hoping for. Now, a lot has been written in this game about the fact that it's Brady versus Foles and all that kind of stuff, but I think it goes beyond just the quarterback matchup. And one of the things one of the reasons I say that is because if you look at Super Bowls in the past, even in the recent past, the better quarterback has not always ended up winning the game. I even think recently, Super Bowl 50, you had Cam Newton, who was having an MVP year, going up against a shell of Peyton Manning. He was not the Peyton Manning that everybody remembers. He was a shell of himself in that season and really did not have a good season that year. And they won that game on their defense. Cam Newton was clearly the better quarterback in that game. You look just a couple years before that in Super Bowl 48 when Peyton Manning was playing a lot better and he was more towards the top of his game. And in that game, the better quarterback didn't win there either, because I would say that Peyton Manning was the better quarterback in that game, and they certainly had one of the top offenses in the league that year, and Russell Wilson and that defense beat them in Super Bowl 48 and beat them soundly. And then, of course, you just have the examples of Brady versus Eli. I don't think anyone's going to say that Eli Manning is as good of a quarterback as Tom Brady was, especially when you look at Tom Brady and some of the teams that he had back then, specifically thinking of the first one in Super Bowl 42. That team was stacked from top to bottom. And clearly, Tom Brady had the weapons and he had the skill, but at the end of the day, Eli Manning is the one that won the day, and they won it basically on their defense. So the better quarterback does not always win the Super Bowl. For that matter, Tom Brady and the Patriots don't always win in the postseason when they're the better quarterback and the better team. Specifically, I think of 2 years ago, that Peyton Manning shell of him former self that I was talking about, they lost to that team. And Peyton Manning clearly, there was always the issue of Brady versus Manning, but Manning was not even close to where he was in the prime of his career. So clearly, Brady was the better quarterback in that game. You go back before that, and you look at who the Patriots lost to before, and they lost to Joe Flacco. They lost to Joe Flacco twice, actually, in the playoffs within the last 10 years. And they also, of course, lost the 2 Super Bowls to Eli Manning. One of those was in the last 10 years. And another guy they lost to within the last 10 years was Mark Sanchez. And that was at home in Foxborough. So that's right, they lost a butt fumble in an AFC, I think it was divisional round game. So really, if you look at the whole history of the Patriots over the last 10 years, they've been losing to quarterbacks that are clearly inferior to Tom Brady. It's not like they're losing to Ben Roethlisberger and Peyton Manning was at the top of his game. They weren't losing to those kind of guys. They were losing to guys who were much further down on the list. So to say that this game is simply about Brady versus Foles completely misses what football's all about, and that is the fact that it is a team sport. So you've got to look at who's the better team when you're trying to figure out who you think is going to win the game. And that's because there is easy ways to beat good quarterbacks. One of the easiest ways the Eagles can win this game is by keeping Brady on the sideline. It's hard for a quarterback to win a game if he's not playing that much. And the Eagles have a very good way of playing ball control. And I've been thinking about this. The last 2 playoff games they played in, I think Doug Peterson really sort of showed his mentality when it came to going up against different quarterbacks. When they were playing against the Falcons, he was much more methodical in the way he tried to drive teams down the field. I think that had to do with the fact that Nick Foles was having some struggles at the end of the regular season, and he wanted to get him some confidence. But I also think it had to do with the fact he wanted to keep Matt Ryan and Julio Jones on the sideline. Forward week, and you're playing the Vikings and Case Keenum, you're not quite as worried about that. So I think he was much more willing to take the shots downfield, because if they didn't work out, you weren't as scared putting Case Keenum back out on the field. So I think that shows that Doug Peterson does recognize that his offense being on the field is just as much about keeping his defense off the field in certain instances as anything else. So I think he recognizes that. He recognizes how offenses and defenses can play complementary football to one another. And I think for that reason, I think you're going to see him really try and stick to the running game in this game and the short passing game, because he's going to want to keep Brady on the sideline. Now, of course, one of the strengths that the Patriots have also isn't just Tom Brady, it's also Bill Belichick, who's probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest coach of all time in NFL history. And they say what Belichick does so well is he looks at your offense and he takes away your best weapon. Well, the question you've got to ask with the Eagles is, what is our top weapon? We have a very effective running game that we can run against you. And if that's not working, we have a passing game with receivers that are very effective as well. So you can try and take away the running game, but then you're going to be vulnerable to our pass attack. And when you look at our pass attack, who are you going to try and take away? You're going to try and take away Zach Ertz? Well, we've got guys on the outside like Alshon Jeffrey, like Nelson Aguilar, who can make plays. So then, okay, are you going to take away those guys? Well, then you still have Zach Ertz in the middle. You've also got the screen game that we have. So there's a lot of different ways we can beat you offensively. And if you look at the Patriots historically, when they've had trouble with teams, it's with teams that can beat you multiple ways with their offense. The game I think of specifically is the opening game this season when they were playing up against the Chiefs. And the Chiefs, I think, are built a lot like the Eagles are in the way that they sort of approach their offense. The Chiefs went into that game with really a 3-headed monster. They had Jason Kelce, they had Kareem Hunt, and they had Tyreek Hill. So you had a running back, a wide receiver, and a tight end, all of which could beat you. And what the Patriots did real effectively in that game is they really limited Travis Kelce, his brother, Jason's brother, Travis. They really limited Travis Kelce in what he was able to do in that game. But what ended up happening? Kareem Hunt and Tyreek Hill went for all kinds of yards against them. So I think that's sort of what the Patriots are faced with in our game is, okay, are you going to take away Zach Ertz, who's one of Nick Foles' security blankets? Fine. We can beat you up top with Alshon Jeffrey, or we can beat you with the crossing patterns with Nelson Aguilar, or we can beat you with the running game. So there's a lot of different ways the Eagles can beat you, and once you see exactly what the Patriots are going to do against you defensively to try and take away one of your weapons, you can adjust accordingly. And one of the things that Doug Peterson has been really good about this year is adjusting to what the other teams are doing. And I think he will do that in this game, and I think he's going to recognize exactly what the defense is giving him, and he will take advantage of that. Of course, the other side is our defense. Even if we're able to move the ball and score a lot of points, it's meaningless if the defense is also doing the same. But I think one of the things about the Eagles' defense is their defensive line is so good. And you can say all you want about Jacksonville and all the sacks they got this year, and the fact that they were called Saxonville, and they really got to the quarterback, and they really got to the quarterback in the AFC Championship game against Brady. But at the end of the day, they were only really, their defensive line was basically their 4 down linemen, and they really didn't have anything else. And by the end of that game, those guys were worn out. That's not going to happen with the Eagles. The Eagles can send waves of players at you. They've got 8 guys that they'll play on that defensive line, and they'll just keep rotating them to keep guys fresh, so that by the end of the game, they're going to be able to send with the same sort of intensity that they've been sending all game. And then I think the offensive line is the one that probably ends up wearing down. Now, one of the things I expect that the Patriots will do to sort of counteract that, the one team that had a lot of success against us this year was the New York Giants. And both times when they had success against us, in the fourth quarter of that first game, and then for most of the game when we played them in North Jersey, was they were going no huddle. And it wasn't necessarily an up-tempo, but they were going no huddle, which prevented the Eagles from really making substitutions. So I expect the Patriots will probably notice that and realize how the defense struggled against that, and they'll try and do that. So we're going to have to take advantage of substitutions and making player substitutions when we can. But one of the things Tom Brady is really fond of doing is when you have a lineup out there that he thinks is favorable to him, he will just continue to go up tempo and no huddle so that you can't make a substitution to sort of counteract what he's doing. So I fully expect that that's what the Patriots will be doing in this game, is they will try and go up tempo against our defense. The downside of that is if you're not moving the ball as an offense and you're doing that, it's really difficult on your defense, as we all saw what happened with Chip Kelly all those years. When he was running up tempo, if you went 3 and out, your defense was right back out there, and it really was a problem for them because they would start to wear down. So you can probably see where I'm headed in my prediction in terms of where I think this game's going to go. But let me put it to you this way. I'm a firm believer in 2 adages in the NFL, and that is defense wins championships and games are won and lost at the line of scrimmage in the trenches. And if you believe in those 2 statements, then I think you've got to recognize that the Eagles probably have a better than 50-50 chance of winning this game. They've got the better defense, and they clearly have the better lines. If you ask any expert in football who's got the better lines with the Eagles versus the Patriots, I think all of them are going to say the Eagles have the better offensive line versus their defensive line, and the Eagles have the better defensive line versus their offensive line. One of the things I did, I was trying to figure out exactly how I could compare the lines and really looking at, is there an objective way that you can look at it? A lot of people use Pro Football Focus for their grading. I don't buy Pro Football Focus in terms of the way they grade out players, just because some of the things that I've seen in terms of the way they've ranked players that I think makes absolutely no sense. Case in point, for this particular game, they ranked all the players from both 53-man rosters from 1 to 106 in terms of where they had them ranked. And in doing so, they had Nate Sudfeld ranked higher than Nick Foles. So that tells you all you need to know about Pro Football Focus. I just don't think it's a credible source when you're looking at that. So I was trying to look for something else because I know a lot of people go to Pro Football Focus. I went to the website I had mentioned a couple videos ago, Pro Football Reference, where they give players what they call an actual value score, where they try and grade them out and give them a score in terms of where they think they rank, and not necessarily rank them in terms of where they are as a player, but assign sort of a point value to them. And I ended up looking at what they had for the starting line for both teams on offense and defense and tried to compare them. Now, keep in mind that when you're looking at offensive line, you've got 5 players. When you're looking at defensive line, you've only got 4. So I looked at their offensive line versus our defensive line. And if you add up all the scores from Pro Football Reference for the Patriots offensive line, it ended up being 43. You then take the 4 starters that the Eagles have on the defensive line. Now, keep in mind, that's the 4 starters, not the guys we're substituting in and out and all that kind of stuff. Just the 4 starters. It ends up being 39. So 43 to 39, but when you consider there's 4 guys versus 5, that's really in the Eagles' favor if you think about it. But it's close. If you look at the other side, if you look at the Eagles' offensive line versus the Patriots' defensive line, that's where it really starts getting scary for the Patriots. And that's because our 5 guys have a combined score of 50, where the 4 Patriots have a combined score of 21. So, the Eagles' offensive line is considerably better than the Patriots' defensive line. And that's where I'm talking about in terms of ball control. I think the Eagles are going to have to play ball control in this game. They're going to have to rely heavily on the running game, try and shorten the game, keep Tom Brady on the sidelines, and I think ultimately that helps our offense because I think it gets us some momentum and we can keep moving the ball. And it also helps our defense to stay rested because if they are running an up-tempo offense against us, it will allow our offense to sort of, allow our defense to sort of get some rest in between possessions. All in all, though, I think when it comes down to is usually in these games is also turnovers. But if you look at all the stats I've talked about, if the Eagles can win the turnover battle and keep possession of the ball and not turn the ball over, I really don't see how this Eagles team loses. Interesting fact about Eagles in Super Bowl as it relates to turnovers. What do Ron Jaworski and Donovan McNabb both have in common as it relates to their Super Bowl appearances? Both of them threw 3 interceptions in a Super Bowl. And if you have that kind of a performance in a Super Bowl, you're not going to win. And if Nick Foles does that on Sunday, the Eagles aren't going to win. But I think they can play a very smart game in terms of keeping possession of the ball. And I do think that Nick Foles has shown that in these instances, he's been very good about keeping the ball. They did not turn the ball over at all in the first 2 playoff games. So I think he recognizes the importance of keeping the ball and making sure you're not turning it over. Now, when it comes to a score for this game, where do I really think this score ends up? I'm going to go ahead and say the Eagles are going to win this game 30-16. I think that the Eagles are really good at keeping teams out of the end zone. I think they're going to be holding the Patriots to field goals. And I think the Eagles have been very effective in the red zone. And when you can run the ball as effectively as the Eagles do, and the Patriots struggle stopping the run, I think that really helps you when you do get in the red zone. I think the Eagles will be able to score touchdowns when they get there. So that's sort of the reasoning for my score. Like I said, score 30-16. And since they do have Super Bowl MVPs, I'll go ahead and throw out my prediction for an MVP on that as well. Like I said, I think the running game is going to be really important in this thing. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and say Jay Ajayi is going to be the MVP of the Super Bowl. I think the Eagles are really going to rely on him and are really going to run him and allow him to have success early. And that hopefully sets the tone for the game. And I think as a result, he ends up winning MVP honors. Finally, one last thing I'm going to throw out there before I finish this video. I was thinking about this in terms of Eagles and Patriots and, guys they have that we had and guys they had that we have. And if you really look at it, think about the 2 guys that are on their team that used to play for the Eagles. It's Eric Rowe and Patrick Chung. Think about the guys that were on their team that are now on our team. It's LeGarrette Blount and Chris Long. I'll take that trade-off any day. I think clearly the Eagles got the better end of taking old Patriots than the Patriots got in taking old Eagles. So right there, I think it shows how the Eagles do have a little bit of an upper hand in this matchup, and I think that's really across the board. I think, like I said, this game comes down to more than just quarterbacks, and really, if you look at it, the quarterback and the experience is really the only thing the Patriots have on the Eagles. The Eagles pretty much win every other area. So for that reason, I'm going to stick with that prediction I've got up there. Let me know in the comments below what you think. What's your prediction for a score? Do you think I'm crazy in thinking the Eagles could win that easily? That's 2 touchdowns. So am I crazy for thinking they could win that easily? Who's your MVP for the game? Who do you think will be the real standout star in this game? Obviously, I'm going to check in afterwards and let you know. Hopefully, we'll be celebrating a huge Eagles win and finally getting the monkey off our back of winning a Vince Lombardi Trophy. Or I'm going to be doing a video where obviously I'm going to be crying a lot. But obviously, like I said, I'll check in after the game, let you know what I think. Until then, fly Eagles fly.